Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. After quite some break, we are now continuing our discussions on the life and teachings of Shri Madhwacharya by C.M. Padmanabhachar, Coimbatore. As we have already seen, this book was published originally in the year 1911 by C.M. Padmanabhachar himself, who was an advocate in Coimbatore. The eighth chapter is titled The Young Sanyasin. Prince Siddhartha forsook the throne and courted poverty out of an overpowering love for humanity. The mighty gulf between the position of his birthright and that of his choice furnishes the most staggering instance of altruism on record. Judged from a human standpoint, the world is not able to show a parallel to this. Sannyasi leaves everything that he is born with, that is, the wealth and other relationships, and he chooses to live a secluded life without the luxuries which he may have been endowed with. So, when we look at Siddhartha, he had everything endowed on him by providence, being the son of a king. He had everything. But due to the overpowering compassion on humanity, he decided to forsake everything and move to a state of that a sannyasi where he has no greed or need for any kind of wealth. In fact, according to Sriman Padmanabhachar, if we look at it from a human standpoint of view, that is, anyone, will they be able to do that? He says. So far, there's been no such record, also, is what he says. Because he says that what did the Siddhartha say? He said, because my heart beats with the each throb of all the hearts that ache, known and unknown, these that are mine and those which shall be mine 1,000,000,000 more, saved by the sacrifice I offer now, I choose to tread its paths with patient, stainless feet, making its dust my bed, its loveliest wastes my dwelling, and its meanest things my mates. Clad in no prouder garb than outcasts were, fed with no meat save what the charitable give, of their will sheltered by no more pomp than the dim cave lens or the jungle bush. This will I do because of the woeful cry of pity for the sickness of the world, which I will heal if healing may be found, by utmost renouncing and strong strife. Light of Asia. This was Siddhartha, great and fortunate, rich and dowered with health and ease, not tired of life, but glad in the freshness of its morning. He was not one that had been satiated with love's delicious feasts, but hungry and passionate for the joys of the flesh, not one that was worn and wrinkled, sadly sage, but joyous with the sunny smiles of youth, health, and strength. He tore himself away from whatsoever was dear to his heart and chose a career of poverty and privation in order to heal the sufferings of humanity. The altruistic sentiments of which Siddhartha's life was an embodied expression staggered humanity by their sublimity. They are too divine to be grasped by the ordinary run of men. The attitude of Siddhartha's selfless heroism is too high for self absorbed mortals to gaze at or to understand. The greatness of Siddhartha lies that it was not that when he was in old age or when he had finished taking all the pleasures that life could offer him, he renounced the world. But he renounced it when he was in the prime of youth, when he had everything at his command. So, that kind of altruistic sentiment which he had, and that too, he had it because he wanted it to find a way to heal the humanity which was suffering. This is the history of a very great personage that has left his footprints in the sands of time. No greatness is possible without a dedication of self for the benefit of others, without an effacement of self in order to increase the fund of human joy or relieve the stress of human suffering. It is refreshing to think that India has been able to boast of sages and saints, the very breath of whose nostrils was selfless heroism. The great man in India has never been the bounding millionaire, loaded with tons of gold and unable to get rid of it by a life of luxury. The great man in India has not been the intellectual man who could glibly talk away at oratorical flights or turn out volumes of fantastic chaff in poetry or fiction. Here, greatness has been synonymous with goodness. We have worshipped greatness that was divine and nothing lower than that. Siddhartha was divine because of the sympathy that he breathed. Other teachers and messiahs were divine because their hearts burst with overwhelming kindness for the sufferings of mankind. It is very refreshing to think that India has been able to produce, or India has had the fortune to boast of such people with selfless heroism. In India, people were considered great not just because of their oratorial skills or because of their cleverness in poetry or fiction, but here the greatness has always been a synonym for goodness, is what Acharya says. The hero of the Bodhi tree has had his representatives and reflections in miniature from time to time ever since he set the example. The body of sadhus in this country, counting only the most sincere and genuine of the lot, has never been a negligible quantity. Sadhuism or asceticism is not a bed of roses. The life of poverty and privation that they lead is so severe and so rigid that it will not be believed in outside India. Those who have a first hand acquaintance with it know very well what a lofty life of self abnegation these recluses and hermits lead. A spirit of calumny and depreciation will point to stray instance of aberration. But these critics know not the inner life of Indian society. So here he is praising, or rather, he is bringing out the greatness of the ascetics of India, who go through a very strict life, who have not much pleasures of the body. In fact, they don't at all have any pleasures of the body because they have the in the sadhuism or the asceticism itself is having the rule that they have to subsist by what others give in alms, whatever it might be. So the recluses and hermits, they don't stay in one particular house. They don't have a proper food cooked for them. Whatever is given, they eat that and they keep on moving. And all this is for the reflection of the truth and for the benefit of the society. The reader will pause for a moment to reflect on the tragic circumstances of Sri Madhwa's entry into the holy order. The boy was not yet of an age to have become tired of life or sick of its monotony and its wickedness. He possessed all that is prized by the worldly wise, everything that could make life worth willing. He was worth living. He was confident of a towering genius, calculated to storm any difficulties and bring the gratification of any desire within his reach. He had for parents two estimable persons who literally idolized him and lavished on him the choicest roses of the heart's tenderest love. He had suffered no griefs, no disappointments, no rebuffs to goad him to pessimism or force him to take the fox's view of life that the grapes were too sour to be worth longing for. So here we look at Madhwa's entry into asceticism. In his case also, he was not having any need to go into asceticism in the sense that he was not fed up of life's difficulties or that he had nothing or he was too old. Nothing like this. He was young, he had everything at his command, he had loving parents, he had a very good intellect, and with that command, he could have enjoyed anything that he wanted. Yet he chose asceticism. Vasudeva fully realized the situation and made a deliberate choice. It was not the silver and gold of Achyuta Preksha that had dazzled his vision, for of that the mutt could not boast much. It was not the pressure of parents, as is too often the case in similar instances. For instead of tolerating him, they offered a stout and vigorous protest and opposed his wish. Nor was it a case of young fancy, tricked by the glamour of riches, rank, or paraphernalia. Any other reasons that Vasudeva could have had to become an ascetic would be the like being forced by his parents or being totally overwhelmed by the grandeur in the mata and be so that he could become the power point at that mat. Something like these could cause people to choose that path. But these were not anything that were within his, because it is very clearly seen that his parents did not force him. In fact, they were forcing him not to become an ascetic. And Achyuta Preksha's mutt could not boast of any gold or too much power also. Hence, Vasudeva's resolution, looked at in its true light, brings the conviction home that no vanity or imposture was at the bottom of it. There was no personal consideration to detract from its merits, and no suspicion of personal aggrandizement attached to it whatsoever. There is a divine aspect too which the Orthodox do not overlook. God had sent down this messenger of truth to correct the erring ways of mankind. Therefore, he could ill afford to waste his years in a prolonged indulgence of boyhood pranks amidst the stale and insipid enjoyments of his father's home, while the great purpose of his mission remained neglected and postponed. His life was a sacred trust for the benefit of the public, and he had no choice but to fulfill the trust as early as might be. So here there is a divine aspect to Madhva becoming the Sanyasin. God himself had sent down this messenger of truth to correct the erring ways of mankind. There was a lot of um, wrong interpretations of the Shastras which contributed this erring ways of mankind. And their search for truth was not getting them anywhere, the good people. So they had to be shown the right path, and for that he had come. So he could not waste any part of his years to reach that point where he could start guiding, where he could start making the point. So he took to sannyasi life at a very early age. It would not have been appropriate for the master to have adopted the householder's life in order to achieve the purpose of his avatar. The spectacle of a grihastha, apparently in the full enjoyment of sensuous pleasures, preaching renunciation as the road to salvation would have been a flagrant incongruity. The discrepancy between profession and practice would have marked the effect of his teachings and fallen flat on an unbelieving public. When skepticism was talking through the land, it was necessary to give it battle with the utmost fervor. The teachings that had gone before him had bewitched the imagination by leading a life of thorough self denial. Sir Sri Madhva saw that for a bloodless reformation, a striking life of asceticism was the first and most essential condition of success. He decided to take to sannyasi life because he knew that whatever he had to preach, that would be most effective if he was an ascetic. He waited not a day more than was absolutely necessary. To keep up appearances, he had passed through the routine of fashionable education and had seemed to be equipping himself with a sound knowledge of preliminary subjects. But he had known it all before as the legacy of births gone by. His memory had always been well stocked with every branch of knowledge and had needed very little of stimulus to be awakened. The condition of misguided men who had lost the way and were groping in the darkness appealed powerfully to him for succor, and his heart was too nobly responsive to be cold. Okay, we shall continue in our next sitting.